Nintendo just blew it out the water. Well, maybe not for supporters of other genres, but we JRPG fans are dining on the finest hors d'oeuvres. So instead of going over these announcements in the end of month news video, I thought it would be best to mention those titles of interest right now. We start with Loop 8 by Marvelous Games, and hopefully that name isn't a reference to the infamous Haruhi Suzumiya arc, you know which one I mean. Now, the reason I mention this one first is because it wasn't part of the Western Nintendo Direct. This will only be releasing in Japan for 2022. But I wanted to at least make this one known, as not only is there a chance it could get an English localization, especially considering that Xbox One is one of the determined platforms and the Xbox historically has never really hooked itself in Japan, it's also a spiritual successor to the PlayStation's Gun Parade March, which in of itself had heavy emphasis on AI-controlled NPCs that adapted their behaviour based on player interactions, which Loop 8 seems to also be adopting via its Kalaru system. On top of that, in terms of presentation, it looks brilliant, and the game seems to be adopting a turn-based style for fans of that archetype. The premise doesn't seem too bad either. It's an alternative future world dominated by a conflict with the so-called Kegai, or giant monsters in this case. Nini, the game's main protag, moves to a rural town, meets a bunch of others, and has got to do some kaiju slamming, though I'm sure it's more involved than that. Here's hoping it gets a localization in the future. Now onto the games mentioned in the Western Nintendo Direct, and we'll start with the Musou spin-off Fire Emblem Warriors Three Hopes, which, as the name suggests, is an extension on the Three Houses mythos. Now, I'm going to be quite brief on this one, as I am playing through Three Houses right now, and I think I got a minor spoiler from watching this trailer, so I'll be keeping it purely to the parts that I know aren't too risky. As the name suggests, this is part of the Warriors line of games, so expect something similar to Hyrule Warriors, where you're mowing down hordes of enemies. Musou titles aren't really for me, but a cool addition nonetheless. Next on the list, a blast from the past. The 1994 Super Famicom classic Live Alive is getting a remake for the Nintendo Switch utilising the same HD 2D engine of Octopath Traveler and Triangle Strategy, and it'll be releasing on July the 22nd of this year. It's certainly got pedigree. It was directed by the likes of Takashi Takita, who some will know as the mind behind Chrono Trigger. The cool thing about this game is that you're playing a series of segments over different time periods, which all tie together into one large narrative. And it also adapts the turn-based gameplay based on the era as well. This will be the first time it officially comes west, but it garnered a decent following thanks to a fan translation in the past, and some even consider it to be a part of the holy trinity of JRPGs from the 90s that were locked to Japan, along with Final Fantasy V and Bahamut Lagoon. Now, as far as I can see, it's releasing both physically and digitally, though for collectors I'm not sure if that edition is being offered outside of Japan, but either way, it's cool to see Square reach into the vaults for a game that initially was a failure in terms of sales. To the Fronts Mission series now, where it was announced that the first two games originally on the Super Famicom were to receive remakes. The first one is due out in summer of this year on Switch only, while the second has had information withheld till a later date. This is great news for fans of the series, as it was pretty much laid dormant for over a decade outside of a terrible spin-off title called Left Alive that released in 2019, which was a stealth game with poor stealth mechanics. Now, as for these games, apparently the soundtrack will be revamped fully and the controls will be modernised, not to mention it'll also be the first time that Front Mission 2 will be released in the West. I don't know much about the classic gameplay that makes up the core of these games, but they're predominantly tactical RPGs with mech battalions. Can't really go wrong with a premise like that. Another trip down memory lane, and even though these two are not an upcoming release, they are a new addition to the Nintendo Switch Online arsenal. Earthbound Beginnings and Earthbound, or Mother and Mother 2 as known in Japan, are now available to play. Now, of course, the big miss here is that Mother 3 is yet to receive the same treatment, but hey, this could be a precursor for the future. Nintendo also shared the original player's guide from the 90s, so anyone pining for a bit of nostalgia as they rejoin NES & Co, or Ninten if you're going to play the first one, will get their fix here. Time to revisit an old rumour. As early as October of 2021, we were discussing the potential remake or remaster of a PS1 classic linked to composer Yasunori Mitsuda, and it quickly turned out that the game in question was Chrono Cross. As part of the notable Nvidia GeForce Now leak, it was made apparent that Chrono Cross was due some love, and Xbox era co-founder Nick Baker also reiterated this stance by confirming a remaster was on its way. Now, there was an event concerning Chrono Cross in December, as it had a crossover with another Eden, The Cats Beyond Time and Space, which also showed off a gorgeous looking trailer, but some people resigned themselves to believing that this was the culmination of the rumours and nothing else was due. Which I always thought was weird, since Square don't really do crossovers unless they're attempting to raise hype for a future release. I think back to Final Fantasy XIV's crossover with Nier, and how the final phase of that harkened to the upcoming release of the remastered Nier Replicant. Sure enough, these flashy trailers were not just a flash in the pan, as a full remaster, Chrono Cross The Radical Dreamers, was announced for an April the 7th release on PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Switch and PC, meaning that it will also be the first time that it sees a release in Europe. That's right, we in Europe didn't get this on the PS1 back in the day. This updated version is going to give you the option to turn off random encounters and an enhanced soundtrack on top of that. It'll also include a text-based accompaniment to the main game called Radical Dreamers, excuse my French here, Le Trésor Interdit, which lays the foundation for the story of Chrono Cross itself. One of the worst kept rumours around, but it's good to see it in concrete form. To the final game now, and I'm sure many of you watching will know which one it is. Right at the very end of this first Nintendo showcase of the year, we got a glimpse of the new Monolith Soft title Xenoblade Chronicles 3. This apparently will be a game that ties into the likes of Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2, and will follow a new duo of protagonists called Noah and Neo, though the director himself has said that this will be a good starting point for new players to the series, but I guess that's kind of to be expected anyway. The trailer also gave us a glimpse of that patented Xenoblade beauty, and it certainly isn't disappointing on that front, especially if that performance maintains itself to the full release. Now, I saw this reveal much later than most. I was in bed when the showcase was on, so when I saw the announcement for the first time, I was thinking, yeah, nice, but it will probably be out late next year or something. No, it's actually out in September of this year, which is crazy, but I guess that pays credence to the rumours that have been circulating this game for a while. Monolith Soft have done well to keep its development mostly under wraps. It makes me happy that I decided to dive in on a Switch late last year, and whether I will have the time to play it immediately, as this will be releasing around the same time as Kurono Kiseki 2 Crimson Sin, which I also hope to play despite the language gap, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 will surely not be too far behind on my personal list. Yeah, it was a good one for us lads and ladettes, plenty to look forward to, and maybe even more should another showcase happen later this year. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and have a good weekend. Peace.